Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Now, Taoiseach, ever since the reports in the Sunday Times with the Garda Ombudsman's Commission being placed under surveillance, up to now, the government and in particular the Minister for Justice, Alan Shatter, have sought to undermine public confidence in GSOC and to essentially rubbish the allegation in relation to the alleged surveillance. And you, Taoiseach, deliberately or otherwise told an untruth regarding GSOC's reporting obligations under the legislation to the government. And that very cleverly early on switched the focus from where the office is bowed to why didn't GSOC report it to the Minister. And last Tuesday we had the Minister addressing the Dáil, and he essentially said, nothing to report here, please move on. And he withheld vital information given to him by GSOC in written form. And if you look at the Minister's statement, and if you contrast it with the GSOC document, it's fascinating to read the deliberate omissions by the Minister. Matters he should have put before the Dáil last Tuesday evening. For example, that the security company which was brought in to do the sweep, saying that the technology used was only, the level of technology was only available to government agencies. He did not say that. That the threat in relation to threat 2, the conference call facility, that the likelihood of that threat being benign was so small as to be at virtually zero. Again, airbrushed out of the Minister's presentation. And critically, that a public interest investigation was launched pursuant to Section 102(4) of the Garda Síochána Act of 2005. Essentially, that the Gardaí were suspects in terms of GSOC's perspective on it, and therefore the invocation of that particular section of the Act. Now, I understand, Taoiseach, that the government have decided now to set up an inquiry or some form of inquiry. But do you accept, Taoiseach, that the Minister for Justice fundamentally withheld very basic and vital information that was in the public interest from this House last Tuesday evening? And are you satisfied with the Minister's behaviour in relation to this entire episode? And I was reminded of what Ombudsman Peter Tyndall said, Taoiseach, and I ask you, do you concur with him? My job, he said, is answerable to the Oireachtas. It is not answerable to individual ministers. Do you accept that the Garda Ombudsman Commission is not answerable to you and is not answerable to Minister Shatter?
Taoiseach, I reject your assertion that the Minister for Justice set out, as you say, to deliberately undermine GSOC. I reject that assertion, Deputy Martin. Clearly, this is a matter about which there has been a great deal of confusion over the last period. Yes, a great deal of confusion over the last period.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the reference which I dealt with myself last week of 80 subsection 5, where I misquoted the section of the Act, and I apologise to the House for that last week. The point, however, is that in regard to the responsibility of GSOC, which is to oversee the Garda Síochána, when GSOC themselves initiate a public investigation into a matter of public interest, it can only be about the Gardaí. And in that sense, the Section 103 of the Act says that the Ombudsman Commission shall provide the Minister with information in regard to what they've done. Now, GSOC have dealt with that themselves. They said they considered it was a very difficult decision. They chose not to inform the Minister at the time, and they regretted that. That matter has been dealt with. But under the section of the Act of 103, where clearly an investigation of public interest into the Gardaí is initiated by the GSOC themselves. They are required by the law. I'll just make that point to you. Now, the Minister for Justice goes before the Oireachtas Committee on Petitions tomorrow, and that committee was set up by this government, and it now deals with this purpose. And the Minister has absolutely no difficulty whatsoever in going before the committee and in dealing with whatever questions or concerns or anxieties that members of the committee might have. ministers. The minister's sole remit here, Deputy Martin, is to obtain the facts and the truth, because as we've said on so many occasions, it is absolutely imperative that both the working relationship and the integrity and the credibility of both the Garda Síochána and GSOC be understood and be maintained at the very highest level. In Section 103, the duties imposed by subsection 1 do not extend to requiring the Ombudsman to provide information, the disclosure of which would, in its opinion, prejudice the criminal investigation or prosecution, jeopardise a person's safety, or for any other reasons not to be in the public interest. I just quote that subsection for you also. Government this morning considered this matter. This morning. The Minister for Justice briefed the Cabinet on the events that have occurred in the GSOC controversy following on from the Committee on Investigations hearing last Wednesday. The Minister briefed the Cabinet in relation to further information and documentation received from GSOC since, and further technical information that he has received regarding the alleged surveillance of GSOC. And in the light of all of that information and his briefing today, the Cabinet decided to appoint a retired High Court judge to review all of these papers, all of the reports, completely independently, and to inquire into all matters of relevance there. It's over 2 weeks now since before this controversy developed. He announced that he would be bringing to Cabinet a number of amendments to the Garda Síochána Act of 2005 relating to GSOC. And it was agreed at Cabinet meeting today that the joint Oireachtas Committee on Justice, Defence and Equality would be asked to hold such hearings for members of the public or agencies or organisations. And I've heard many comments from noted members of the public about the inefficiency of the law here. And the Justice, Defence and Equality Oireachtas Committee will take hearings from them on their views on how the law should be changed, amended or whatever else, and furnished to the Minister for Justice. As I said, Minister appears before the Oireachtas Committee tomorrow, and in regard to any questions, anxieties, concerns or issues that members have, the Minister will deal with them fully and openly and comprehensively in the interest of truth and the facts. Cancórla.
Taoiseach, the only people who have been endeavouring to sow confusion on this issue is yourself, the Minister, and the Government. And the reason we're having, and I'd like you to clarify the exact status of this, of the role and remit of this retired High Court judge. Are we talking about a Commission of Inquiry under the Commission of Inquiry Act 2004, for example, or are we talking about the appointment, in essence, of a retired judge to review documentation and to make subsequent recommendations? Is that the amount of what's happened, or the level of what's and scale of what's happening here? That is extremely important. Taoiseach, I put it to you fundamentally that the Minister did not level with the Dáil last week. He did not give information that was in his possession, written information that was in his possession in this document, because he wanted to do something Tuesday night.
Please. Thank you.
Tuesday evening he wanted to downplay the entire situation and say there was nothing to report here. It was just a bottle of smoke. I mean, you could hear it in the news bulletins the following 24 hours. Let's move on here. It's a bottle of smoke. There's nothing here. So much so that members of the Commission had to go on prime time and bury that notion.
Could I have the question, please?
Bury that notion, Taoiseach. And he didn't refer to the fact that a public interest investigation had been invoked. He didn't refer to the fact that it was government-level technology was in use here, and also that the threats were, the likelihood of them being benign was remote or close to zero. I think you should man up, and the Minister should apologise to the House for his behaviour on this issue and for the manner in which he treated GSOC. And it's wider than this, Taoiseach. This is wider than this. I raised an issue with you last week. It's not going away, and I'll be doing it again this week.
Thank you.
The administration of justice does something fundamentally wrong now, Taoiseach, at the very core.
Sorry, Deputy, please.
And the Minister has taken the wrong on this issue and on a number of other issues that to go to the very heart of the administration of justice in this country. And I know that some ministers know this.
Deputy, I'm sorry, you're over time. Would you please, Taoiseach?
I would suggest to Deputy Micheál Martin, leader of the Fianna Fáil party, if you have information about the maladministration of justice in this country, then it is your duty and your bound and responsibility to bring that to the notice of the Minister for Justice. And I would advise you I would advise you very strongly. I would advise you very strongly, Deputy Martin. I would advise you very strongly, if you have information to back up what you've just now said in this House as the leader of your party, then you have a duty to bring it to the notice of the Minister for Justice and to do so personally. It happened on many occasions before. Secondly, we're talking here about the appointment of a retired High Court judge to review all of the documentation and all of the reports that have been produced on this matter to date. And that will be done completely independently. I said to review all of the documentation and all of the reports that are there under a terms of reference set by the Minister for Justice and the Attorney General, and to report to the Minister inside 8 weeks. Now that means, Deputy Martin, that if you want to question the independence of a High Court judge, well then do. Well, the High Court judge will look at all of the documentation, the process, the technical reports and the information and the statements that have come from everybody about this in a completely dispassionate and independent way and report to the Minister for Justice inside the next 8 weeks. Let me repeat again. If you have information about the maladministration of justice in the country, bring it to the notice of the Minister for Justice.